In this video tutorial, we're going to look at how to draw our practice finger joint. The joint that we're going to create is going to look like the one currently on the screen. We can see our measurements that we need to have. Essentially, we have two pieces of wood that are 100 millimeters long by 12 millimeters thick and 40 millimeters in width. That's deliberately done so that we can then have our four finger joints here, each being 10 millimeters wide and of course 12 millimeters from the end to allow for the thickness of the wood. So we're going to replicate this joint, and we're going to do that in the quickest way possible. So let's now start a new SketchUp. Okay, as normal, let's get rid of our little person, and let's always again make sure that we have our measurements correct. So we are in millimeters, and 1 decimal place is fine. Now, unlike our previous tutorials, we're not going to try and simulate what we do in the classroom with the real equipment and wood. We're just going to try and draw this as quickly as possible. So before we do it, if we just think about that joint, essentially what we have is two pieces that are actually the same, but because the fingers have to interlock, what we have is one that is flipped and rotated. So we can actually get away with just drawing one piece to begin with. So I'm going to start by just drawing a normal rectangle, and I'm going to draw it in its length at the moment. So I need 100 millimeters in length, and I need 12 millimeters in width. So I'm going to type those measurements in down the bottom. There we go. So it's obviously nice and small, so that's fine. We're going to zoom in to see the whole model. Zoom out just a little bit and rotate for clarity. I'm now going to use my push-pull tool to bring it up to the 40 millimeters in width. And again, I'll just zoom out so I can see the whole model. There we go. So this is my one piece, and I'm going to draw my finger joint down the end here. So in the classroom, I'd be drawing a 12 millimeter line down here and all the way around. Then I'll be dividing it up into four equal pieces of 10 millimeters. Again, those lines will be going all the way around, but we don't need to do that in SketchUp. We can do that just in a few quick movements. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am still going to use a construction line to draw that 12 millimeter line down. But unlike, as I said, the real piece, I'm not going to draw this all the way around on all four sides. I'm now going to use another construction line to go 10 millimeters from this end. And I'm going to go another 10 millimeters again from that line. And lastly, 10 millimeters from that line. So again, it's sort of like what we would do in class, but these lines are not going all the way around as well. So we can do this a lot more quickly. I'm now going to take my square tool again, and I'm simply going to draw a square in one section here, skip the next section, and then go to the next section here. So essentially what I've done, I'm going to get rid of this section and this section, leaving these ones here as my fingers. And again, I would normally be drawing all these lines around, and then I'd have to go and cut them and use different tools. But again, SketchUp, the beauty of this, of course, is I can quickly take my push-pull tool, and these sections that I want to get rid of, right, and it has to be the ones where I drew the square. If you notice, if I go here, this whole model select, if I pushed and pulled here, I'd be affecting the whole model, which is obviously not what I want. All right, so it has to be these ones that I drew, these separate squares. So I'm just going to push them out. I'm just going to push it back to the line. You can see how it's set on edge, because now that's going to disappear. So even if I went a bit too far or too short, right, if I accidentally did it wrong, if I pull it back to a line like that, it now has disappeared. So I've now cut out essentially these two pieces, leaving these two fingers. Okay, I'll just clean up my construction lines. I don't need them anymore, just with my rubbing tool. And as in most cases, I'll now quickly turn this whole section into a group. so that I can move it around as one piece. So there we have one half of our joint. So as we said before, because this is all done perfectly, it's not like the real world where we have slight anomalies. I can actually just take this entire piece and I can make a copy of it, pasting it over here. And all I need to do now is to flip this over so that instead of it being a finger at the top, it's now got this hole so they can join together, and also rotate it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the rotate first, and I'll explain why I want to do that first in just a moment. So taking my rotation tool, and I want to rotate around this axis. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit more to see it. So I've got to make sure my protractor is facing on the blue axis in this case. I'm going to go from end to end, and I'm going to rotate it around. And it's exactly 90 degrees. I can either type that in the bottom down, as I can see there, or it's locking into place nicely for me. So I'm happy with that. Oops, try that again. There we go. I'm now going to take my move tool, all right, and bring it forward. And I've deliberately not flipped it yet because I want to just show how, this is the problem. If I don't flip it over, I've got fingers trying to join the fingers and gaps trying to join with gaps, and that's obviously not going to work. All right. So now what I need to do is, of course, flip it as well. So I just wanted to really make that clear that we do in fact need to flip this piece over. So again, I'll take my protracting tool, and this time I want to flip it around the axis that way. So I'm going to do it from the side where I can see it a bit better. So from there to there. And as with before, I can either lock it in place or I can type 180 in to get an exact flip over. Whoop, missed it again. There we go. And now if I take my move tool again, it's now maybe at a different angle. It's now lined up in a way that I can take, say, a point, remembering points like to lock together. So if I take maybe this corner at the front here, all right, that would lock in with this corner here. So if I use that as my reference points, I might be able to, maybe if I change direction a bit. Being a bit difficult. Here we go. As always, you just sometimes have to move things around to get the right angle, to get things to lock. And there we go, finally got it to lock into place. So in essence, I've now just drawn my practice joint. I did it by just drawing one piece in actual fact, because it is obviously a duplicate for the other side, just flipped around as we talked about. Of course, in the real workshop, it takes a few more steps, and we don't have the luxury of just flipping a piece because we're not machines. We don't do things perfectly as we can do in SketchUp. But from a design point of view, there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking those shortcuts and taking advantage of the fact that we can draw things perfectly and replicate and make copies of pieces. So you should have been able to replicate this now. It would be good to include the dimension lines in a similar way to I showed you at the start of the video, and maybe even showing another copy of this where it's sort of blown apart a piece to show how the joints are separate. So off you go, create your practice finger joint design.